On the 26th of July 1956, Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal Company, taking the Suez Canal out of Anglo-French control. This threatened Britain's access to oil, which was supplied to them by Iran, Iraq, and the Persian Gulf states. In fact, 2/3 of Britain's oil supply was shipped through the Suez Canal at the time. This made it essential for them to regain control of this strategic route. France and Israel also had their own issues with Egypt. The Egyptian President Nasser was in favor of Arab unity against Western imperialism and wanted Egypt to take a leading role in Middle Eastern affairs. France saw the Egyptian government as a supporter of Arab rebels in French Algeria. Israel and Egypt were, of course, hostile to each other ever since the Arab-Israeli War in 1948. Egypt was also currently blockading the Straits of Tiran, which cut off Israel's only access to the Red Sea. The Egyptian-controlled Gaza Strip also served as a base and training ground for the Palestinian insurgency against Israel. From the 22nd to the 24th of October, the three countries held secret negotiations and planned a joint military action against Egypt. Britain and France wanted to secure the Suez Canal and remove Nasser's government from power, while Israel had territorial goals in the Sinai Peninsula. However, the European powers would need a cover story to justify their involvement. It was decided that Israel would invade Egyptian territory and then move towards the canal. The British and French governments would then demand a withdrawal of Israeli and Egyptian forces away from the Suez zone, after which Anglo-French forces would invade under the pretext of protecting the canal and keeping it open for international shipping. At the same time, Israel would use the invasion to achieve three strategic goals. The first, to capture the Red Sea port of Sharm el-Sheikh and reopen the Straits of Tiran. The second, to capture Arish, a major Egyptian army base in the Sinai Peninsula which threatened the Israeli border. And the third, to occupy the Gaza Strip and then crush the Palestinian insurgents. By the 29th of October, Israeli forces had mobilized and reached their staging areas without arousing suspicion and were ready for operations. In the afternoon, lead elements of the 202nd Paratroop Brigade were airdropped near the Mitla Pass in western Sinai, so as to cut off supply and communication lines to the east. They were to entrench themselves in defensible positions and then wait for the rest of the brigade, who were en route by land. These reinforcements were to reach the pass within 24 hours, but were slowed down by loss of vehicles to the desert and only arrived by evening on the 30th. Meanwhile, to the south, the 9th Infantry Brigade entered Egyptian territory and carried out a night attack on the outpost of Ras an-Nakab. The defenders were taken by surprise and surrendered by midnight, giving Israel control of the route south to Sharm el-Sheikh. Further north, the 4th Infantry Brigade had been tasked to storm Al-Qusayma near the Egyptian-Israeli border. This outpost controlled an important intersection of two roads, one screening the 202nd Paratroop Battalion's northern flank as they advanced to Mitla Pass, and the other leading towards Arish. Although slowed down by difficult terrain, the brigade reached their objective by 3 a.m. on the 30th and routed outnumbered and unprepared Egyptian forces in the area. On the 30th of October, at Al-Qusayma, the 4th Infantry Brigade were joined by tanks and other vehicles from the 7th Armored Brigade. They were to advance together towards Arish, capturing the village of Abu Uwayyula on the way. This target lay at the junction of several paved roads and was therefore an important transportation hub in Sinai. To the east of Abu Uwayyula, however, lay a series of ridges, making up a natural defensive zone the Israelis called the Hedgehog. This position was fortified and defended by battalions from the Egyptian 16th Infantry Brigade. Elements of the 7th Armored Brigade attempted to probe the Hedgehog for favorable avenues of attack, but were engaged by Egyptian defenders and lost several vehicles to artillery and anti-tank fire. To the south of Abu Uwayyula, the Israelis discovered a lightly defended gap on the Hedgehog's western edge. This pass was quickly captured, and tanks and tracked vehicles of the armored brigade made their way through during the night. It was also on the 30th of October that the British and French governments demanded that Egyptian and Israeli forces withdraw 16 kilometers away from the Suez Canal, or they would be forced to intervene. At dawn on the 31st of October, the 7th Armored Brigade made their way to Abu Uwayyula and captured the objective after an hour's fighting. They then moved towards the Hedgehog from the west. Under cover of darkness, Israeli forces attacked the Hedgehog again, the 7th Armored Brigade from the western end and the 10th Infantry Brigade from the east. While the 7th Armored Brigade captured the western ridge after a fierce 8-hour-long battle, the Israeli assault on the eastern ridge was repulsed. Before dawn on November the 1st, large groups of British and French aircraft made their way over Egyptian air bases in Cairo, Alexandria, and within the Canal Zone. They strafed and bombed the parked aircraft, destroying some 200 planes, which was most of the Egyptian Air Force. Surviving Egyptian aircraft scattered to bases in southern Egypt, giving control of the skies to the attackers. Soon after, at dawn on the 1st, fighting over at the Hedgehog resumed. The 10th Infantry Brigade made another assault, while the 4th Infantry Brigade advanced up the road from Al-Qusayma. A fierce combat ensued, with French and Israeli aircraft now striking the Egyptian positions with rockets and bombs. Facing heavy pressure from 3 directions and running low on water and ammunition, the Egyptians were forced to retreat. By midnight on the 1st of November, the defenders had evacuated their positions and made their way north to Arish. To the northeast, the Israeli 27th Armored Brigade and 1st Infantry Brigade were preparing to encircle the city of Rafah at the eastern border of the Gaza Strip. Cutting the strip off from Sinai would give Israeli forces a free hand to conduct operations in Gaza. Once again, the Israelis engaged in a rapid night attack, and by 9 a.m. on November the 1st, they had captured strategic positions surrounding the city and separated Gaza from the Egyptian lines. With the British and French invasion of the Canal Zone imminent, Egyptian forces in the Sinai were in a dangerous position. They now risked total encirclement. President Nasser therefore ordered a general retreat to the west. Between the night of the 1st and the morning of the 2nd of November, the entire Egyptian 3rd Infantry Division retreated en masse towards the Canal Zone, leaving Israeli forces free to enter Arish and putting them essentially in control of Sinai. Having secured Rafah and driven the Egyptian army back, the Israelis advanced on Gaza City at dawn on the 2nd of November. The defences, only held by a brigade of the Egyptian National Guard, were soon overrun by Israeli tanks. These were followed by the 11th Infantry Brigade, mopping up Egyptian resistance in Gaza City by noon and then taking control of the city. Israeli troops then headed towards the western end of the strip, and by evening on the 3rd of November, they had ended all organized resistance in Gaza, linking up with the 1st Infantry Brigade at Rafah. Now, the only major objective which remained was to secure Sharm el-Sheikh and reopen the Straits of Tiran. To this end, the 9th Infantry Brigade departed from Ras an Nakab on the 2nd of November, with nearly 200 miles of rough terrain to cover between them and the city. At the same time, the 202nd Paratroop Brigade were also to be deployed from the west, but anti-aircraft defences around Sharm el-Sheikh meant that a direct airdrop was too risky. The 202nd Brigade instead attacked and captured the nearby airfield of Tor, where they were resupplied by airdrop in preparation to move against Sharm el-Sheikh by foot on the 3rd of November. By midnight on the 4th of November, the 9th Infantry Brigade had reached the outskirts of the city. They attacked at dawn on the 5th, supported by airstrikes, forcing the Egyptian defenders to surrender at 9:30 a.m. 6 hours later, the 202nd Paratroop Brigade also arrived on the scene. Israeli forces had been highly successful and achieved all their goals in good time, mainly because of two reasons. The first reason was that they utilized the element of surprise. Israeli troops moved rapidly, often under cover of darkness, and overwhelmed unprepared Egyptian forces by using nighttime attacks. The second reason was air superiority. After the Egyptian Air Force was put out of action, Israeli ground troops had the benefit of close air support and supply drops. At the same time, Egyptian troop movements in the open desert were then vulnerable to attacks from the air. With Sinai in Israeli hands and the Egyptian army in retreat, it was now time for the next phase of the operation, the combined Anglo-French assault on the Suez Canal.